if you can't convince us, then you can't convince a judge. We get a lot of pushback on this, a crazy amount of pushback. This is reasonable adjustments that you have to make for employees. The key thing with reasonable adjustments is that you don't have to agree to all of them. For example, if an employee is coming back from long-term sick, or if an employee has an issue, they're willing to stay in work, but they need some adjustments, or if they have some protected characteristics, for example, that you become aware of and you have to make adjustments for them. That's the kind of situations where you might have this. You don't have to say yes to everything that they ask for. It's not a blanket yes, but you have to show that you have properly considered what they have asked for before you can say no. And this is where we get a little bit stuck. If you are going to say no, you need to show why. You need to be able to say, why are you saying no? You can't just say no because we don't do that here, or no one else gets that, or it's a cost to the business, or it's inconvenient. You have to treat them as an individual. You have to consider their situation as an individual, and you actually need to be able to show that for a critical business reason, you are not able to make this reasonable adjustment. So the adjustment is not reasonable for the business. One thing I will tell you is what judges think is reasonable and what employers think is reasonable has a massive gap. There's a huge gap between that. Judges will not be able to see how a person who works in the office answering emails and phone calls can't work from home as a reasonable adjustment, even temporarily or some of the time. You're going to struggle to convince them. If you can't convince us, then you can't convince a judge that that person really cannot work from home. Or if you have a person who needs to work shorter shifts. Maybe you have someone who's returning from being off sick and they're saying to you, I can only really stand for kind of 4 hours, but they work in the bar and their shifts are normally 8 hours long. Just saying no because it's a pain to schedule that and because other people are going to be like, well, why do they get to work short shifts? Is not a reason. It doesn't convince us. It won't convince a judge because a judge will say, but that person is quite willing to do their entire job just for 4 hours instead of 8. How is it completely impossible for your business to be able to schedule that? The gap is really, really big between what judges think is unreasonable and what employers think is unreasonable. The biggest mistake that we really see employers make is to say no straight off the bat. Sometimes this happens more often than you guys would think before they've even had the request. Before they've even had the request, they anticipate what the request might be, and they're already saying no. And then the second biggest mistake employers make is not treating the person as an individual. So giving answers like, well, everybody here works the same shift, or nobody here has any special shifts, or nobody else here works from home, or we don't allow that here. We don't allow home working here. That is the biggest mistake, not treating them as an individual, looking at what they can do and what you as an employer can adjust in their working pattern, their tasks and duties, their working environment to help them either come back to work or stay in work. That is what you are expected to do. We get this a lot. The email usually starts with, so-and-so has asked for reasonable adjustments. How do we say no? That is usually the tone of the email. Just a heads up, we are probably going to push back really, really hard on that. Push you hard to say, prove to me that you really can't do it, that the business impact is so severe that it actually is not reasonable for you to do this. And if you can't convince me, you won't convince a judge.
Thanks for watching. If you want a free peace of mind call with us to discuss your policies, handbook, and any burning staff issues in your business, click the link in the description below.